So the way this feels, or the way the Z07 package feels when you drive this car, according to someone like Aaron Link, is it feels like the hand of God pushing you into the ground. So not only does this car have a ton of mechanical grip through the tires, you also have the car being pushed literally into the ground as you're cornering.
And the last part to talk about with Aero is it's hard because if you're just making this a pure race car, you don't care about a lot of these like drag issues as much on a street car. You could put a bigger wing on the back, you could put a bigger wing in the front, you could put larger canards. They were trying to find an optimal blend of creating aerodynamic downforce and reducing lift while not creating an assload of drag that could potentially hurt fuel economy and
Everything else associated.
Now, onto one of the most complicated topics, Jack, suspension design and tuning.
So the first thing to bring up is the C8 Z06 inherently is a compromised car. Even though this is the most hardcore Z06 they've ever built, with the highest overhead capability, this has to be all things to all people, and it still has to be a car that you can live with on the street. So there are inherent design compromises with the suspension, not going all the way on everything, not making it so unbearable race car-like where you don't want to drive on the street. That's something that Corvette has done versus something like a Viper ECR, a GT3 RS, where those cars are more race car than street car in many ways. So let's talk about suspension tuning. As we mentioned earlier, the control arms are identical to the C8. However, the bushing control arms are different. They are far stiffer, and that is so the tire doesn't get sucked underneath the car due to the lateral loads. The reason they did not go to spherical bearings or bushings is they didn't want all that NVH to make its way back into the cabin of the vehicle. The spring rates are also radically different. Because the architecture of the C8 is so stiff, they felt that the NVH from the higher spring rates wouldn't make its way into the cabin, and they're largely correct. So the base Z06 without the Z07 package has a 30% increase in ride frequency versus a C8 Stingray with a Z51 package. When you go to the Z07 package, they go up by another 10-ish%. And one of the key reasons they go up is the Pilot Sport Cup 2Rs, which are an exceedingly sticky tire. We've talked about them in previous videos, like our GT3 video. They blend some of the rubber compound of a Michelin racing slick with the, it's called friendliness of a street tire.
They also looked at the telemetry data to find that their recalibration of these systems were largely because of the tire change from the summer tire option to the Cup 2Rs. When they went to the Cup 2Rs, they found that they needed to not only up the spring rates, they needed to change the MagneRide damper profiling, and then the EPS tuning, because the steering had changed that much, going to a much stickier tire compound. But the more rate they threw at it, the more they found that there was more stability in the car. And even in terms of alignment, they found they didn't have to go hyper aggressive with the alignment. With the Z07 package, it's a static 2-degree negative camber in the front and the rear, and they found that had the optimal tire contact patch at that point.
And this car demonstrates a different mindset in suspension tuning. So in previous gen Corvettes, they changed sway bars for the Z07 package, and they lean more on the MR dampers. This time around, Gen 4 dampers, they found instead of overly stiffening up the shocks, they could change the rates, and the car itself would take it. It wouldn't totally make this a miserable experience. Let's talk about the VGRS rack next, or the EPS rack. This is physically the same unit that's found in the C8 Stingray, however it's been recalibrated. It gets calibrated based on what brake package you have, whether this is carbon ceramic equipped or steel equipped, whether it has the Pilot Sport Cup 2Rs in the Z07 package, or if it's a standard car as well. So let's talk about the carbon fiber wheels. Not only are they very expensive for carbon revolutions, but they're actually functional, not just to look at. They drop about 41 pounds, which I know that sounds like an arbitrary number, but in the real world, depending on the racetrack, that's 1 to 2 seconds gone. And again, they have to recalibrate the steering of this vehicle to deal with the fact that the steering has now gotten very light.
Yeah, and you're dealing with a large amount of unsprung mass shaved off, and that's equivalent to a lot of time on the track apparently in their testing. The other thing they've done with these wheels compared to other carbon fiber wheels we've seen before is there are ceramic inlays on the center part, which looks like this white strip. That is to pull away heat or to reduce heat to prevent damaging the resin of the wheels from excessive heat coming off the brakes.
These are the largest brakes ever fitted to a Corvette. So if you option the carbon ceramics that are 398 millimeter in the front, 380 millimeters in the rear, you also have a steel brake option. There's extra cooling with more ducts in the front of this, and it is still brake-by-wire, or as GM calls it, e-boost. They've had to recalibrate the ABS systems that Bosch set up, and that's primarily due to brake bias.
And this is something, in terms of tuning, there's a lot more that goes into it than you would think. Taking this car around the world to feel out different tracks helps to adjust brake bias where it needs to be. The tuning goes deeper than that. Like giving this car to someone who does test driving for them on the Autobahn, going over 100 miles an hour consistently to figure out VGRS tuning. Believe it or not, some people want to sit on the highway with not having two hands on the wheel. So finding that balance of assistance force is all a part of this calibration that they do.
The other thing to bring up, Mark, is the overall philosophy in tuning in this car, making sure everything is as natural as it can be, given the fact that this is entirely controlled by electromechanical systems, right? It's not manual steering or manual brakes, so they want to make sure all the inputs are one-to-one, but they also want to make sure this car is approachable, as we talked about at the beginning of the segment. So a big part of that is their EDIF setup with PTM. So PTM is what GM calls their performance traction management system. It's controlled by both drive modes and other things. So you have to be in track. Then you have 5 different layers. One being the most nerf,
which is like wet mode, which is the most restrictive. Large amount of, in some cases, fuel cut, spark cut, and brake intervention to keep you on the intended course.
And then all the way up to 5 and 4, which no longer use brakes to intervene, and that gives you the most slipping in 5 mode or race 2, whatever it's called. It is the least invasive, but it should make you faster. If a pro driver is driving this vehicle, it is basically like easy mode. It lets you get away with a lot, but it will also somewhat save you. But if you want to go sideways really, or you are extra brave or extra stupid, you can turn everything off and you're truly on your own.
And that's the really great part, and some of the negative part about all the electromechanical and the software side of this. From having 3 different calibrations for the EDIF, you have 5 different calibrations plus off for the PTM system. And even knowing how much spark to cut in mode 5 or race 2, all these different calibrations they have to do to make sure that this car is always responsive, quick, and most importantly, transparent, Jack. The driver does not want to know these systems are there, and that's what the black art of this is.
So let's head to Milford, where we're going to speak to Aaron Link, who's the lead development engineer, where he's going to be talking about exhaust, philosophy behind suspension tuning, and some of the other facets of this vehicle. We're underneath the C8 Z06 with Z07 package at Milford in Michigan. This is GM's proving grounds, and this isn't Mark because his hairline is vastly superior. Sir, please introduce yourself.
I'm Aaron Link. I'm the Vehicle Performance Manager for Corvette. Yeah, at Milford here, we're the car whisperers, I guess you could say. What we do is the tuning, the development, the calibration of all the parts to make a harmonious experience for this kind of car.
Fun details.
It is, yeah. You know, we talk about the last 5%. So for me, what I love about any car, front engine, rear engine, mid engine, is a limitless amount of front grip. So if I go into a turn too hot and it tightens up on me, decreasing radius out on the roads, not even on the road course, I want to have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to dial in a little more, and it's not going to wash out. So that's probably the number one, is getting the balance right. You know, you can weaken the rear to help the front stick, but then obviously with a mid-engine car, if you get that weight swinging around and you don't have enough capacity, that's kind of the fear of the mid-engine change. So I guess when I joined this team, I knew in my mind this is sports cars. To me, what I kind of wrote down, just notes of goals and objectives, was let's make the rest of the car match what this engine brings to the party, which is super low inertia, knife edge reflexes, knife edge responses, and obviously the sound was the biggest thing we could do to highlight it.
The ZL11LE, which is something you worked on, I would consider that to be a Chevy family in terms of hardcore, like dialed in.
Right.
Where is this at?
11, I'd say.
Do you think it's hit the time?